A war rages between 4 aquatic factions vying for control of a vast ocean world. However, after centuries of fighting, it's become clear that no one kingdom is powerful enough to bring peace. To prevail, each faction must now choose an ally. The all-new Battle for the Deep by Renegade Game Studios is a 2v2 battle experience where players choose their teams, army compositions, and even starting locations, creating an Axis and Allies experience like no other. Let's make it hot. Welcome to Board Game Nation. My name is Gary Blevins. Thank you so much for watching. And a special thank you to our friends at Renegade Game Studios for sponsoring today's video. Check out the link in the description to see where you can get your copy of this great game and so much more. If you're new to the Axis and Allies franchise, welcome. Now, you'll be happy to hear that this is the easiest Axis and Allies game to learn, mostly because there's only one type of terrain, the wet kind. This is a solid entry game for those intimidated by the bigger historical games or for folks who just prefer the fantasy setting. Still, as easy as this game is, while we're explaining it, we're going to jump around a little bit in the rulebook, but there'll always be a little graphic that pops up like this one with the relevant page number in the rulebook for the topic that we're talking about so that you can reference it later. You can also use the chapter guide to jump around to any section that you want to watch again. Now, before starting your first game, I recommend that you watch this video all the way through once and then bookmark it. When you're ready for the battle to begin, you can quickly refer back to this video and the rulebook if you have any questions. We're also thrilled to introduce our newest member of the Board Game Nation team. Ava Matthews will be helping us with today's video, and you can look for her in other upcoming BGN videos that focus on fun, casual games. Please welcome Ava Matthews.
Thanks, Gary. Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. As a lover of fantasy-themed games of all types, I am really excited about Battle for the Deep. So let's jump right in. Battle for the Deep is designed by Matt Hyra and is based on the classic Axis and Allies game created by Larry Harris. Battle for the Deep is for players ages 14 and up. It plays in about 90 minutes and can be played with 2 to 4 players, but is best as a 2v2 game. The game comes with a beautiful map and all the various tokens, dice, and pieces you'll need to play, including these handy player reference charts, but the real stars of the game are the 112 sculpted miniatures. Whales, war turtles, a guy riding a dolphin, plus giant lobsters, mermaid warriors, and necromancers. Very cool. Anyway, Battle for the Deep is, well, a battle for the deep. Players are vying for control of an ocean world over up to 7 rounds of play. Each round starts with player 1 and ends with player 4. At the end of each complete round, players will check for victory. An early victory can be declared in 2 ways. First, if a base has been captured, the team holding the enemy base is declared the Lords of the Deep. If both sides have captured an enemy base, the team controlling the space at the center of the map marked with the number 4 is the winner. Second, if a team has a collective total of 30 victory points on the tracker, they are taking home the glory. More on how to collect victory points in a minute. Let's get this game underway first. To start a 4-player game, each player will choose their player number at random. Players 1 and 3 are a team, and players 2 and 4 are the opposition. At this point, it's probably best to arrange the seating in play order. You don't have to, but it'll make it easier to keep track. Once player numbers are chosen, this will be the turn order for the rest of the game. Everyone will now choose from one of 4 factions in player order. A quick note. Player 3 has a bit of an advantage here. They get to pick their faction after seeing what their teammate Player 1 has chosen, and they leave Player 4 with whatever is left. Even though Player 4 doesn't really get a choice of faction, they will get significant advantages later, during the setup and during the actual game. If you are playing with 2 or 3 players, all factions will still be used. In a 2-player game, Player 1 will control factions 1 and 3, and Player 2 will control factions 2 and 4. In a 3-player game, 1 player will handle 2 factions, and the other 2 players will have 1 each. You can sort out which player is going to play 2 factions however you'd like, but obviously those 2 factions will be on the same team. As for the factions, players can choose the Undersea Kingdom, with their fast-moving and cunning mermaid warriors, or the Leviathans might be more your style. Led by a giant jellyfish, the Leviathan's offensive power and tricks can keep an enemy reeling. The war turtle leads the protectors. These slow movers can pack a punch, especially on defense. The necromancers lead the 4th faction, the Denizens of the Deep. I really appreciate the alliteration here. The Denizens of the Deep are crafty creatures that feed on death and can even use fallen enemy units to defend them. How very denizen of them. Once the factions have been assigned, it is time to take to the sea. Place a control marker for each faction at 0 on the VP tracker, and a second token near the tracker, but off to the side. Now is also a good time to make sure that the battle markers and the gray and green stacking chips are within easy reach of everyone. Now, again, in player order, players take turns placing their 12 RP faction base tokens in any zone not previously taken with the number 3 in it. Make sure the base token covers the number 3. Players can choose spaces marked 3 that are near their ally's base or an enemy base, and they should feel free to talk about this very important choice. We are going to have some strategy tips later on, but for now let's get through the rules. Okay, now players have selected their factions and placed their bases. It's time to choose the composition of your starting forces. All of these deep sea warriors are purchased using reinforcement points, called RPs for short. Looking at the player reference chart, each player starts with 50 reinforcement points to build their starting army. These can be spent during the setup process in any way you'd like, but any unspent RPs are lost. Once selected in turn order, all of the units are placed on the map in the same space as their base and placements. The selection of these units can be done by all players simultaneously. However, players can change their setup purchases after seeing what players before them have placed, so watch very carefully. One last note about setup. You can use as many of the minis as you have, but it might get crowded as the game progresses. Good news, the game comes with these green and gray stacking chips. Each mini equals 1 unit. A gray chip under that mini represents another unit of the same type. Green chips represent 3 additional units of the same type. So a mini with a gray chip under it equals 2 units of the same type. A green and a gray chip under a mini equals 5 units of the same type. You get the idea. Now, an important note here, the number of stacks of units is limited by the number of actual miniatures that came with the game. So you can have as many giant jellyfish as there are chips, but they can only be in 4 different zones at the same time. And with that, you are set up and ready for action. But before I send you back to Gary to talk about gameplay, let's talk about this beautiful map and how it works. Unlike traditional Axis and Allies, there are no land territories. All the spaces are equally wet. But there are lots of impassable obstacles. On the player reference chart, each unit has a movement value. Anytime a unit crosses one of these straight blue lines, they use a movement point. No units may pass through or over any of the obstacles. However, this is a wraparound map from the right to the left sides, but not top to bottom. These arrows indicate the spaces that units can use to jump to the other side of the map. Each zone is always in one of 3 states: neutral, friendly, or hostile. Neutral zones have no enemy units, bases, or markers in them. Friendly zones have a control marker, units, and/or a base controlled by you or your ally. Finally, hostile zones contain a control marker, a base token, and/or units belonging to an enemy power. Most of the zones have numbers in them. These are called victory point zones, or VP zones for short, and they do 2 things. The total value of the VP zones that you control at any given time is your victory point total. Remember, players use reinforcement points to rally more armies to the fight. At the start of your turn, you are awarded RPs equal to the total value of the VP zones. Oh, and now is a good time to make sure that the base tokens you placed a moment ago cover up the printed number 3 in the zone. These are base zones, and defending them is critical. If controlled by their original owner at the start of their turn, they produce an additional 12 RPs rather than the 3 marked on the board. More importantly, capturing an enemy base is the fastest way to end the game. If a base zone is captured, turn the token over and place a control marker belonging to the capturing power in the zone. Another difference here from traditional Axis and Allies, capturing a base doesn't transfer anything to the victorious attacker, but it does stop the former owners from collecting the 12 RPs on their turn. But far more important is this: if the round ends and a base is captured by an enemy player, the game is over, and the occupying team is the winner. So guard them very carefully. One last thing, all zones in the deep have a maximum number of units. Base zones have a max of 12 units, all other zones have a max of 8 units. When counting towards this limit, include all the units in the zone, not just belonging to a single player. Good news, there are times when units can exceed this limit, but Gary will talk about that later. Speaking of Gary, let's get back to him to get this battle started.
Thanks, Ava. Let's start with some quick vocabulary. Ava touched on this a bit, but for clarity, Battle for the Deep is played in rounds, turns, phases, and steps. Each player has a turn. Each turn will have 6 or 7 phases, and some of those phases will have steps. It sounds like a lot, but it really does go pretty quickly. Each round starts with player 1's turn, proceeds in the player order drawn during setup, and each round is complete after player 4 has completed their turn. Now, while the game may end earlier, no game will have more than 7 full rounds of play. Oh, and lots of our Undersea characters have abilities that will allow them to vary from the rules that we're about to talk about. After we get the basics down, Ava and I will double back to the special abilities for the various units. Let's take a quick look at the phases of a player's turn. Phase 1 is Purchase Reinforcements. Here, players will collect the reinforcement points by adding all of the values of the victory point zones that they control, plus 12 if they control their home base. Using the reference chart, players will use any or all of their RPs to purchase new units and place them into the reinforcement zone. RPs cannot be shared between players, and they are use them or lose them. Any unspent RPs are washed away with the tide once you start Phase 2. Phase 2 is called the Combat Move. During this phase, using the available movement points of the various unit types listed on the player reference chart, the active player may move any, all, or none of their forces into hostile zones. Remember, hostile zones contain enemy units, markers, or bases. Key point here, movement by units in this phase must end in a hostile zone. If it doesn't, it's not a combat move and should be saved for later. While moving to or from combat, all units may ignore the stacking limits. Also, any number of units may attack the same zone. If the number of surviving attacking units exceeds the stacking limit of that zone, that is a problem, but we'll resolve that later. The maximum number of hostile zones that can be attacked per turn is limited to 6. To keep track, place a battle marker in each zone. Once the last battle marker is placed during a player's turn, they cannot instigate any additional battles. This includes zones that contain enemy markers or bases, but no units. One small but important note, players may not make a combat move into an enemy base zone during the first round of play. But at the start of the second round and beyond, it's open season. And with that, let's look at a quick example of a combat move. This game is in round 5, and the Leviathans have teamed up with the Protectors. They're facing off against the Undersea Kingdom and the Denizens of the Deep. The Undersea Kingdom is player 4, and they are currently the active power. They've already made their purchases, they're ready for their combat move, and they are eyeing up the Protectors' base zone. The Undersea Kingdom are the pink merfolk warriors. The Protectors are the orange crustaceans, and these magenta pieces belong to their allies, the Leviathans. While they aren't going to be directly involved in this battle, it's worth noting that the black pieces are the Denizens of the Deep, and because they're teamed up with the Undersea Kingdom, zones with their units and/or markers will be considered friendly to the Undersea Kingdom units. The Undersea Kingdom drops a battle marker in the Protector's base zone and starts moving units into the fight. The Merfolk Warrior can only move one zone per turn, so all 4 units move in. The Seahorse Knights can move up to 2 zones. 4 of them decide to evacuate their home base and jump into the fight. They're joined by 2 more from the center base zone. These guys hanging out by the big volcano cruise through the friendly zones belonging to their denizen pals and enter from the west. A few things to notice real quick. The guys coming from the west entered via a zone that had already hit its max capacity of 8 units. That's cool. Stacking limits don't matter while making combat moves or during combat. For example, you'll notice that the Undersea Kingdom brought 15 units into a zone that can only hold 12. Again, that's cool. Well, for now. If they get to the non-combat and they're still over the limit, we'll have to work it out then. One other thing, the Dolphin Riders in the north and the northeast could have entered the fray, but they opted to save them for non-combat. Also, the Seahorse Knights in the east would have loved to get in on this one, but they're blocked by the Protector's units and they don't have enough movement points to go around them. They could have attacked the units that are in the way, but even if they'd won, they'd end the turn in those zones, so they decided to wait for non-combat. Once all the combat moves have been declared, it's time to separate the phytoplankton from the kingfish in the conduct combat phase. While each battle is resolved one at a time in the order of the attacker's preference, all battles are actually happening simultaneously. So make sure that you're happy with all of your combat moves before you start rolling dice. Once the battle begins, no combat moves can be added or changed. And you're going to want to have this handy-dandy player reference chart close by for this part. You'll be looking at the attack and defense values for the units, plus the various special abilities that we're going to talk about later. The Conduct Combat phase has a simple 5-step sequence that's really at the core of any game powered by Axis and Allies. Step 1, any first strike abilities are resolved. More on that later. Step 2, attackers roll 1 die for each attacking unit. When you have multiples of the same unit type, you can roll them all at the same time. For each roll equal to or less than the attack value of that unit, a hit is scored. The defending player or players choose one defending unit to assign casualties for each hit scored. The units assigned a hit should be set apart from the remaining units, but they should not be removed from the map. They will get to swing back. In Step 3, the defending player will roll one die for each defending unit, including those previously selected as casualties earlier during this round of combat. Defending units score hit for each roll equal to or less than their defense value. The attacking player selects one of their attacking units for each hit scored as they see fit. In Step 4, the defending players remove their casualties off the map and return them to their respective supplies. After Step 4, one of four things will have happened. 1. All of the attacking units are destroyed. In this case, the battle is over, the defenders do a little dance, and they maintain control of the zone. If all of the defending units have been destroyed, the attacking faction has captured the zone. The attacker replaces the enemy control marker with one of their own, or if this is a base zone, they also flip over that base token to show the captured side. Another possible state is that all attacking units and defending units have been removed. In this case, of course, the battle is over, but the tie goes to the defender and they retain control of the zone. In all three of those instances, the battle is considered resolved. Remove the battle marker and move on to the next battle. Or, if that's the last declared combat, that is the end of the conduct combat phase, and it's time to move on to the non-combat move phase. However, if after Step 4, attacking and defending units both remain, the combat sequence moves to Step 5. Here, the attacking player gets to decide if they wish to continue the combat or retreat. If the attacking player chooses to retreat, they move all of their attacking units in this combat to a single adjacent, friendly, or neutral zone from which at least one of them entered the attacked zone. In the rare case that there are no adjacent friendly or neutral zones, retreat is not an option. If they choose to continue the combat, a new round of combat begins with Step 1. This process continues for as many rounds as is needed until all of the units on one side or the other have been destroyed or the attacker chooses to retreat. Once all the battles have been resolved, the non-combat move phase begins. First thing, any zones where the site of the battle has attacking units that now exceed the stacking limit of that zone must now move units of their choosing to an adjacent friendly or neutral zone where at least one of those attacking units entered the attacked zone from until the stacking limit has been reached. So you can't use this rule to mass evacuate your victorious units. You can only take out units until the limit is reached. Also, if there are no friendly or neutral zones adjacent to the overstacked zone, the excess units must remain in that zone, which is not going to end well. Once that's done, the active player may move any units that did not make a combat move this turn up to its maximum number of movement points. These units may not enter or pass through any hostile zones. However, units can make non-combat moves that move into or through any uncontrolled VP zones. If any unit ends its non-combat move phase in one of these zones, they'll place a control marker and take control of it. One little thing here. The game comes with 14 control markers for each power. 2 of them are used for tracking victory points, leaving 12 for marking captured zones. If, while on your way to complete dominance of the deep, you use all 12 of your available control markers, you can't take control of any additional zones. But you can still remove your foe's control markers, and you can still capture enemy bases. On to Step 5, check for stacking limits. Time to pay the piper for those overzealous attacks. In each zone where you've got units and the stacking limit has been exceeded, destroy units of your choosing belonging to your faction until the stacking limit has been met.
Yikes, one star, do not recommend.
Absolutely right. Next up, Phase 6, Deploy Reinforcements. Here you'll move your shiny new units from the reinforcement zone into your starting base zone, not an enemy base zone that you might have captured. You may not deploy units that exceed the base zone stacking limit of 12, and be sure to count your teammates' units as well. If you've got units that you can't deploy, they've got to hang out in the reinforcement zone, but you may attempt to deploy them on future turns. Now, if your base is currently captured, you may deploy your new units to any spaces that you currently control instead, but remember that non-base zones have a stacking limit of 8. Time to update the victory point tracker to reflect your newest conquests. Total the current victory point holdings for each power and make sure their markers are in the right place. If one power gets more than 15 VPs, leave their marker on 15 and use their second marker to track the excess glory. The end of the 4th player's turn is always the end of a round, and it's time to check for victory. If either team controls an enemy base and/or a combined total of 30 victory points, they win. If both sides control an enemy base, the team that also controls the center victory point zone with the number 4 in it is the new master of the deep. If the victory conditions have not been met, advance the round tracking token and start a new round of play. If the victory conditions have not been met by the end of the 7th round of play, the team with the most combined victory points is your winner. A moment ago, we showed you an example of the Undersea Kingdom's combat move. Let's double back to that and see how it turned out. The kingdom only has one battle this turn, and it's for all the undersea marbles. I like to organize the units on the board by their respective values. Merfolk warriors attack at a 1, and Seahorse knights attack at a 3. Defending the base zones are units belonging to both enemy powers. We've got 7 crab soldiers with a defense power of 2, and 2 whales from the leviathans with a defense power of 3. The attacking units have no special abilities, neither do the crabs. The whale does have a special ability, but it isn't relevant here. Time to start the combat sequence. Step 1. None of these units have the first strike ability, so we can skip this one for now. Step 2. Attackers roll. The mermaids roll and get 1 hit. Now we've got 11 knights to roll for, but the game only comes with 6 dice. You can roll as many times as you need to until all of the units have been accounted for. So for the first 6 rolls, they score 3 hits. The next 5, 3 more, for a total of 7 hits all day. Now the defenders must select 7 casualties. They opt to lose all 7 crab soldiers and move them to the side, but not off the board because it's time for them to fire back. Looking for a 1 or a 2, they roll 6 of their 7 dice and score 3 hits. Not bad. Their 7th roll is a miss. Time for the whales to roll. They need a 3 or a less to hit. No joy. The attackers must now select and remove 3 casualties. They select 3 of the mermaid warriors. Step 4, the defenders remove their casualties. Step 5, there are still units on both sides of this battle, so the attacker gets to choose whether they wish to press the attack or retreat. If they opt to retreat, they can move all of the attacking units to either of the zones the units came from. If they decide to continue the battle, we go back to step 1 and we do it all again. Now, smelling blood in the water, the Undersea Kingdom decides to continue the fight. Back to step 1, still nothing to do here. Step 2, attacker rolls. 1 mermaid warrior looking for a 1, a miss. 11 knights roll their first 6 and get 3 hits. More than enough. You can ignore any excess hits, and there's no need to roll for the remaining attacking units. The leviathans must select the whales as casualties. Step 3, do the whales take anyone with them on their way to the depths? No, the whales fall alone. Step 4, they're returned to the leviathan supply, and the Undersea Kingdom is victorious. They flip the base token over to the captured side and place a control marker. While we're here, let's look at some of the non-combat moves available to the Undersea Kingdom. Looking around, we can see that there are no zones that exceed their capacity. The Dolphin Rider and the Seahorse Knights on the east side of the map head back to their base. The pod of Dolphin Riders in the north want to spread out. One wants to back up the Knights that just took over the Protector's base. Normally, this wouldn't be a problem, but there are already 12 units in that zone, so this would be a bad idea. They decide to stop in the neighboring zone. One rider decides to run up the score by moving up to the uncontrolled zone in the northeast corner. Rider 3 opts to cruise down and hang out with their friendly tentacles. The last rider decides to take a victory lap in the center of the map. At the end of non-combat, the Undersea Kingdom takes control of the zone in the northeast and moves to deploy reinforcements. Everything moves into their home base with room to spare. Looking at the entire map, we reset the victory points. We can see that the kingdom had 15, but they picked up 1 more. We leave their marker on 15 and place their second marker on the number 1 to show their new total of 16. And with that, we come to the end of the Undersea Kingdom's turn, and they are the 4th player, so it's time to check for victory. Does either side have a combined total of 30 victory points? Negative. Does either side control an enemy base? They do. The Undersea Kingdom and the Denizens of the Deep are your winners.
Now that we've covered the basic rules for combat, it's time to learn about how some of these deep water warriors can bend them. Let's start with our pink friends in the Undersea Kingdom. The Mermaid Warrior and Seahorse Knights are cool, but don't have any special abilities. The Dolphin Rider has an ability called Hit and Run. Normally, any unit that made a combat move can't also move during non-combat. Not so for the valiant Dolphin Rider. During non-combat, the Dolphin Riders may use any remaining movement points to move to a friendly or a neutral zone. The captain of the Undersea Kingdom is the Flying Fish Squadron, and their ability is called Flight. This allows them to move through hostile zones and attack, or they can move through hostile zones during non-combat. But like normal, they can't end the non-combat movement phase in a hostile zone. These guys are expensive, but with a movement of 4 and no ability to block them, trust me when I say you are always going to want to know where these guys are and what they can reach.
That's good advice. Let's look at the Leviathans. All 4 of their units have special abilities. The Swarm can Frenzy. While on attack or defense, whenever they score a hit, they immediately roll again. If they hit again, they roll again. This continues until they miss. Next, we've got the shark. Their ability is called Territorial, and it can be a bit of a blessing and a curse. These solitary hunters cannot share a non-base zone with another shark, except when performing a combat move into a hostile zone. If one or more sharks survive an attack against a non-base zone, excess sharks must exit the zone during the non-combat move phase in the same way as if the stacking limit had been exceeded. But be careful, if they can't exit into a friendly or neutral zone that's shark-free, they're destroyed. The whale has a very useful ability called Host. When a whale makes a combat or non-combat move, it may carry up to 3 of the swarm units with it. These transported units cannot move on their own during that turn, nor can they be carried more than once during the same turn. Lastly, the biggest and the baddest of the Leviathans, the giant jellyfish. These beasts have an ability called First Strike, and they're the only reason for step 1 of the combat sequence. While on attack or defense during that fateful step 1 of combat, the jellyfish roll. Any hits scored by the giant jellyfish must immediately be assigned by the opposing side, and any units assigned these hits are immediately removed from the board and will not get to roll. Unless, perhaps it's the war turtle. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But a very important note here, the giant jellyfish only rolls during step 1 of the combat sequence. They will never ever roll during steps 2 or 3. They get the chance to hit first in each round of combat, but not twice.
Got it. Time for the protectors. You know what, Gary? You do the protectors. I want to talk about the denizens of the deep.
Okay. The abilities of the protectors, as their name might suggest, are primarily focused on defense. The giant nautilus has an ability called Jet. While attacking or defending, this unit may retreat to an adjacent friendly zone instead of rolling its dice in either the attacker rolls or defender rolls step of combat. However, if the unit has been chosen as a casualty while defending during a round of combat, it cannot retreat and it must roll. The keyword here is friendly. If no adjacent friendly zones exist, they may not use this ability. The giant lobster has a particularly powerful ability called Pinch. Normally, the opposing player decides where to assign incoming hits. Not so much for the giant lobster. While on the attack or the defense, hits from the giant lobster are assigned by their owner. This one can make a huge difference in a battle. The war turtle has the thick shell ability. Basically, this means that it takes 2 hits to destroy. The first time the war turtle is assigned a hit, tip it over but leave it in place. It continues to fight as normal until it's chosen as a casualty for a second time during the same battle. Then it's removed from the board as normal. If the combat ends and it has not been removed from the board or grabbed by a tentacle, more on that shortly, the war turtle heals, returning to its full upright position and continuing as normal.
Finally, the diabolical denizens of the deep. Their attack and defense stats don't look like much, but their special abilities should not be underestimated. The deep one looks like the Swamp Thing, and some guy I went out with in high school once, and he's the cheapest of the denizens. But other than that, has no special abilities, like that guy I went out with once in high school. The Shoggoth's Reanimate ability makes them the definition of impossible to kill. While attacking or defending, the first time one or more Shoggoths is taken as a casualty during each battle, you place one of them directly into the reinforcement zone. It will remain there until the Denizens player's next Deploy Reinforcements phase, which could be the very same turn. It is then deployed as if it had been purchased during Phase 1 purchase reinforcements. The possibility of free units every turn? I like it. I think the Tentacle's ability to grab is the most interesting in the game. When a Tentacle unit scores a hit while attacking or defending, the chosen unit is grabbed instead of hit. When it would normally be removed, instead place it on its side near your units and away from units friendly to it. Starting in the next combat round, the grabbed unit doesn't roll dice or use any special abilities. It is not released until the end of the combat, even if the tentacle that grabbed it is taken as a casualty, with one exception. A grabbed unit can be taken as a casualty in place of its own units by the Denizens faction, returning it to its owner's unit pool as usual. At the end of combat, all grabbed units are returned to their owner's unit pools, even if they were not taken as casualties. Multiple units may be held by the same tentacle at the same time. Oh, and one note, if a war turtle is grabbed, it loses the protection of its thick shell. It gets dragged over to the dark side where it can then be destroyed in a single hit. Last but certainly not least, the Necromancer. This dude literally feeds on the death of his fallen comrades. While attacking or defending, the Necromancer gets a +1 to the appropriate value for each friendly unit in the same combat that is taken as a casualty. They also get a +1 for each unit that was grabbed by the tentacle that is subsequently taken as a casualty. They don't get the bonus when a friendly war turtle takes their first hit, but they will if it is actually removed from the board.
And those are all the rules for Battle for the Deep powered by Axis and Allies. You are ready to dive in, shove off, set sail, insert your favorite nautical term here, but you're going to want to hang out for another minute or two for some rapid-fire strategy tips for setup and gameplay. Here goes.
Making smart choices during the setup process is going to go a long way to ensuring victory. Each faction has 4 unit types with various costs and 50 reinforcement points to spend, but you can only place 12 units in your base zone. So where to start? Well, page 14 of the rulebook has a number of great faction composition options. It shows 2 options for each, one balanced and another that leans into a particular strategy. For your first game, I suggest using the balanced option.
Because this game has so many options for faction pairing, army composition, and base placement, no 2 games are ever going to be the same. Still, here are a few tactics that you should keep an eye out for. We hinted at this one earlier, but the Flying Fish Squadron can be one of the most consequential pieces in the game, particularly if it's being controlled by the 3rd or 4th player. They can fly over 3 zones full of hostile units to land on a base zone, and if they're successfully holding an enemy base at the end of a round of play, that's the game. So watch out for these guys.
I think the combination of the Swarm and the Necromancer could be a really powerful combo when defending a base. You can put 12 units there, a Swarm unit only costs 2, and they get that extra roll when they hit. And then when they die, they give the Necromancer a +1. So 10 Swarm and 2 Necromancers in a base could be really hard to beat.
One last combo to keep in mind, the Giant Lobster and really any kind of mass attack. When they hit, they get to pick the enemy unit that's taken as a casualty, so they could pinch a whale or an overjuiced Necromancer.
With so many great options, let us know in the comments what combinations you're excited to try. Thanks again to our friends at Renegade Game Studios for sponsoring this video. You can follow the link in the description to get your copy of this great game and so much more.
Thank you, Ava. Great job. When Ava's next video with Board Game Nation is ready, it'll be right here. For more Axis and Allies content, here you go. For our latest bit of mayhem, right this way. And if you're ready for more from Board Game Nation, click here to subscribe. Thanks again to Ava Matthews. My name is Gary Blevins. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.